The moment I saw the shadow cast over my driveway, I knew I was in trouble, but nothing could prepare me for the absurdity that unfolded. "Sir, your vehicle is in violation of community parking regulations," Tim said, puffing up his chest like he'd just solved a crime. I couldn't help but chuckle. A smooth, pristine car sitting in my driveway was a centerpiece of my perfectly legal property, yet there they stood, swap-meet security guards in pale blue polos, ready to haul it away like it was a crime scene. What violation are we talking about? I asked, crossing my arms, intrigued. Section 12, Paragraph 8, Line 4, he shot back, dabbing a finger on his clipboard as if that gave him authority. No private vehicle may remain parked in a visible residential area for more than 48 consecutive hours without significant relocation. I blinked. You're telling me you're towing my car because it's been parked at my house? Tim nodded solemnly, eyes wide with misguided righteousness. I had to give him credit. He actually seemed to believe his own nonsense. As I leaned against the porch post, my neighbors began appearing like it was an unexpected showcase, a gathering of spectators of what they thought would be a comedy. Mrs. Feldman's phone was already out, recording. Mr. Jenkins was whispering to his wife, their dog Max sitting nearby, seemingly entranced by the unfolding circus. "Oh, please, do continue," I said, not bothering to hide my smirk. The absurdity of it all could have been a scene right out of a sitcom. Part of me wanted to watch them dig their own grave. Roy, now busy with the winch, grumbled something under his breath about HOA rules. I resisted the urge to laugh. Were they really this clueless? The Okayu 48-hour rule probably came after I had tossed an old lawnmower collecting rust into the backyard without thinking. "I'm curious," I began, feigning seriousness. "What's the fine for this heinous crime?" $1.50, Roy announced proudly, puffing his chest out even further. "So let's recap," I said. "You're about to tow my $85,000 vehicle over a $150 parking fine." Tim hesitated. His bravado faltered as the math didn't quite compute. But then he straightened, summoning what little authority he could muster. The rules must be enforced. The tension among the neighbors was electric. They were edging closer, gathering to see the fallout, and I could tell they'd be buzzing about this for weeks. "You really want to enforce it?" I asked, pulling out my phone and dialing Sergeant Diaz. "I believe my vehicle is being stolen." As I awaited the familiar voice, Tim's confidence dwindled to a nervous twitch. The duo exchanged frantic glances, the thrill of power quickly evaporating. "So," I announced, sliding my phone into my pocket as I pointed at Tim, "you should know who you're dealing with. I'm Colton Rains, Chief of Police." Their faces drained a color. The bravado evaporated. Tim's notepad dropped, and Roy stared slack-jawed. "About 3 minutes from now, a patrol car will be here, and we'll see who's breaking the law," I added, enjoying the stunned silence that fell over the scene. The sound of the tow truck's engine sputtered to a halt. The laughter of my neighbors echoed in the background like a chorus. The irony of the situation was more than I could handle. "You boys want to keep digging this hole?" I asked, eyes locked on their panic-stricken faces. Diaz arrived, cool and collected as always. "Can someone explain why there's a tow truck trying to remove the chief of police's vehicle?" Tim stammered, trying to flip through his notepad as if attempting to conjure a magical excuse. His gaze darted around like a deer caught in headlights. "Do you have a court order for vehicle removal?" Diaz pressed, eyebrow raised. Silence fell. Tim fumbled, exchanging whispering glances with Roy. "Because an authorized removal of private property without legal cause is considered attempted theft under city ordinance," Diaz added, and I could almost feel the dread wash over Tim's shoulders. The crowd of neighbors had turned into a full-blown audience at a comedy show now. They were ready to feast on the impending spectacle when Marlene, the HOA president, entered the fray like a thunderstorm, but her arrival only deepened the absurdity. "What's happening here?" she screeched, marching forward with fervor, clipboard in hand. "Just your regular HOA terrorism," I grinned. "Starbucks in 24 hours. I heard a neighbor mutter under her breath, barely stifling a laugh. Diaz shot me a look, but the smile was infectious. Marlene's frazzled hair bounced as she approached, clueless of the impending disaster she brought upon herself. "Oh, not much," I replied sweetly. Just call the police because 2 of your overzealous volunteers tried to steal my car. Steal? She echoed, eyes wide, searching for meaning. Quite standard HOA procedure. Diaz said wryly, crossing his arms. Isn't that right, Marlene? Her expression shifted from confidence to utter confusion, realizing she had stepped into a storm of her own making. As she fumbled through the bylaws, her voice stumbled over her words. I authorize this because... Can you prove my vehicle hasn't moved in 48 hours? I pressed, cutting her off. No, she stammered, then faltered further. Actually, I just realized. Something shifted in the back of her mind, and the air turned electric. And do you know whose car this is? I leaned forward, and her paled expression was all I needed. She started, but the words fell silent, drowning in her realization. I'm the chief of police, I reiterated with a grin, reveling in the victory that came with that title. Tim's and Roy's faces morphed into masks of dread, realizing they had just crossed lines they never should have approached. Remember, an authorized removal of private property could consider abuse of power, Diaz stated, pen poised. Are you boys ready to keep digging? I could have sworn their faces paled further as they exchanged terrified looks. No court order, no board approval, Diaz confirmed, sealing their fate in a single stroke. The neighborhood cheered as Marlene fumbled. Fine, she huffed, shoulders slumped. Cancel the fine. I'll send an email to all residents explaining our mistake. And as they unhooked my car, I couldn't help but smirk. Whatever lesson they thought they'd imparted had turned into a glorious way to start my day. Life had a funny way of throwing unexpected punches, but I had to admit, this one was deliciously sweet.
Cancel the fine. Marlene sputtered, her voice tinged with disbelief as Tim and Roy scrambled to unhook my car. The tension hung thick in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. Absolutely, I replied, arms crossed, enjoying every second of their humiliation. And while you're at it, how about a heartfelt apology to the neighbors for this circus? The gathered crowd murmured in approval, their phones still rolling. A brilliant moment in community history was unfolding right before their eyes. Marlene's face turned a mottled shade of red. This is an embarrassment. You can't. Actually, I can, I shot back with a grin. As chief, I can make things very uncomfortable for anyone who toys with the law. Trust me, this isn't a game you want to play with me. Tim looked like he wished he could vanish, his eyes darting around for potential escape routes. Roy, still fiddling with the winch, muttered something under his breath about overstepping authority. Diaz sauntered over, not letting the momentum die. You boys didn't happen to check the legality of your actions before trying to tow a vehicle from private property, did you? Silence fell. Marlene's clipboard trembled in her grip. We followed protocol. This is just a misunderstanding. Not a single person in the crowd was buying it. You should consider lesson number 1 in leadership, Marlene, I said, pacing slightly. Never overestimate your authority. The neighbors began to chuckle lightly, sensing blood in the water. Excuse me. Marlene snapped, hair frizzing as her brows knitted together in anger. I didn't authorize an illegal tow. I gestured to the tow truck, its hook still hovering awkwardly near my pristine car. And yet here we are. Okay, Marlene relented, exposing her vulnerability for the first time. Just stop making a scene. I'll send the email. We made a mistake. As she blustered off toward the sidewalk, the tension started to ebb. Tim and Roy, meanwhile, finished unhooking my car, shoulders sagging under the weight of defeat. I felt an odd pang of sympathy, as if they were pawns in a game spun wildly out of control. But before I could stow the victory dance swirling in my head, I noticed a man striding purposefully down the street, dressed sharply in a crisp suit, eyes locked on me. Colton, he called out, waving a hand. I recognized him instantly. Mayor Stevens, all business and rarely anything less. What is going on? He demanded, brow furrowed as he approached. Mayor. Just dealing with some overzealous HOA members who decided to test my patience. I gestured over to the fumbling duo, but Tim and Roy had retreated a few steps back, heads bowed, acting like 2 children caught stealing cookies from the jar. Emergency meeting. Is that what this is? The mayor pressed, eyes narrowing as he crossed his arms, assessing the scene like a hawk. Because you know I'd like to divert energy toward the town budget instead of this circus. A smirk tugged at my lips. Let's call it a community lesson in leadership. Taking back authority one rogue HOA at a time. He didn't laugh, but there was a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Just make sure it doesn't become a media frenzy. Last thing we need is a viral video of our police chief and HOA looking like a couple of clowns. We have an image to uphold. Marlene's more than accommodating, I replied, holding back laughter. Right. Should I start expecting a resignation letter? He teased. I'll settle for an email to the neighborhood titling any future HOA actions as determinedly theatrical, I said, bemused. At that moment, I heard a crunch from the gravel driveway. A figure emerged from behind the tow truck. A girl stood in her late 20s, arms crossed, dark hair cascading over her shoulder. What are you doing here, Amy? Tim's voice turned shrill, pulling everyone's attention toward her as if she were a guardian angel sent to save them. She's the new neighborhood lawyer, Roy explained quickly, panic bubbling in his voice. She was just closing a deal. A deal? I echoed, curiosity piqued. What kind of deal? Amy crossed her arms tighter. The kind that might get you two terminated if any legal action is taken. What do you mean? Marlene snapped, backpedaling toward her. This is HOA business. Any business that puts your regulations into the law will need to follow due process, something you've failed to do today, Amy shot back. The neat fabric of Marlene's authority was fraying rapidly. If I were you, I'd think twice about Perry's parking policies. From behind me, laughter rippled like waves. Tim's eyes widened. You don't think they can overturn us? Crisis management, boys, I interjected, stepping forward. Guess it's not just about you stealing cars anymore. It's about you jeopardizing the very community you swore to protect. The mention of community struck home. Marlene's face turned from red to ash. We didn't mean anything by it, she whined, the facade cracking. It was just to keep the neighborhood looking tidy. By stealing? Amy countered sharply. Diaz cleared his throat, drawing everyone's focus back. If you're serious about turning this into a legal issue, don't take it lightly. The last thing we need is for you to draw unnecessary attention to yourself when your actions may not align with the law. A tangible silence settled in as everyone digested the implications. At that moment, it hit me. Life has a funny way of upending expectations, and here I was about to witness the unraveling of a cabal. Well then, boys, I said with a confident smirk, looks like you've not only miscalculated your authority but may well be stepping onto thin ice here. The wave of uncertainty rolled through them, visible beads of sweat forming on their brows. We'll see about those bylaws in the near future, Tim and Roy. Remember today's lesson, don't mess with the chief. The crowd erupted into applause, laughter ringing through the air. Pride bubbled up in my chest. Today, power had shifted in more ways than one, and I relished the taste of it. Don't mess with the chief. The applause roared in my ears, but I couldn't let the victory go to my head. As laughter echoed through the neighborhood, I turned my gaze back to Tim and Roy, who stood rooted to the spot, confusion and embarrassment washing over them like a tidal wave. Okay, so what are we going to do here? Amy pressed, stepping forward, her demeanor shifting from anger to businesslike urgency. You need to make a statement, Marlene. Maybe even apologize to Colton. Marlene held back her frustration, teeth clicking together like an old rusty gear. Fine, she said through gritted teeth, her gaze darting around to gauge the crowd's reaction. But only if you promise not to make this a thing. A thing? I scoffed. You were about to commit vehicle theft and congestion charges out of thin air. Trust me, it's already a thing. The crowd erupted into murmurs again, more excited than ever. I imagined the retellings of this moment playing out through social media as soon as everyone got home. A firestorm of HOA follies, and I was smack in the middle of it. I'm going to my office. This isn't worth my time, Marlene muttered before beginning to retreat, but I couldn't let her slip away without adding the cherry on top. Don't think we're done here, Marlene, I called after her. With great power comes great responsibility. I expect a formal apology issued immediately.
She paused, the shadows of her ego reflected back in the sunlight. All right, I'll draft something. But you better not expect this to turn into a trend. With that, she hurried off, leaving Tim and Roy hanging. A wicked grin danced on my lips. You guys must be feeling pretty stupid right now. Before they could respond, Amy stepped closer to them, her expression shifting into something hard. You're both fortunate this is just an embarrassing misstep. Had this gone differently, you'd be looking at severe punitive actions. Did you even check if you were authorized to do this? Tim feebly shook his head. We just assumed. Yes, you assumed, she confirmed sharply. And assumptions are what got you into trouble in the first place. You have no idea what you've opened yourselves up to, do you? Their faces grew paler, like two ghosts dropped into the surrounding crowd. I interjected. So you thought you could just play law enforcement without doing your homework? Newsflash, this isn't a video game where you can respawn. Roy fidgeted nervously. We were just trying to do what we thought was right for the neighborhood. For your poorly defined neighborhood laws. I replied, crossing my arms. As the neighbors dispersed, a few lingered, eager for the unfolding drama. I hope this isn't the last we hear from you, one onlooker chimed in. You should keep this energy alive, maybe start community meeting for actual discussions about changes. Yeah, another added, let's get some safety and real regulations in on this HOA power trip. Tim and Roy exchanged glances, the weight of their folly hanging heavy between them. They were cornered, and they both knew it. Just as things seemed to settle, the sound of sirens interrupted the proceedings. A police cruiser pulled up, lights flashing. Diaz stepped out, urgency etched into his features. Colton, we got a call about a disturbance at your location. Disturbance? I responded, incredulous. What's happening now? You're not going to believe this. Seems easy enough to believe when HOA members decide to double down on stupidity, he said dryly, gazing at the tow truck. Then he looked around, taking in the embarrassing scene, and let out a low chuckle. Just another day in paradise, eh? I gestured toward Tim and Roy, who were still standing like deer in headlights. Just a couple of wannabe cops trying to tow my car over a non-existent infraction. Diaz grimaced. You two really think you could get away with that? We were just following protocol. Tim blurted defensively, avoiding eye contact with the actual authority. Diaz took a step closer, his tone flattening into seriousness. You might want to rethink that strategy, because if you keep invoking the law without actually knowing it, you might find yourselves on the wrong side of it. Amy nodded along, rolling her eyes. A little due diligence would have done you wonders. Let's move on, boys, Diaz said, gesturing for them to clear the scene. You're done, hey? As they shuffled away, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy mixed with satisfaction. How delicious it was to see them rattle. Amy turned toward me and caught my smile, her expression softening. That was well done. Colton, you really stood your ground. In that moment, I caught the glimmer of professionalism in her eyes that told me she wasn't just a new lawyer but could easily become an ally in the struggles against overreaching authority in our neighborhood. Thanks, I replied, leaning back against my car with a triumphant grin. Want to help me turn the tables on this HOA? Her eyes lit up with mischief, and I knew right then that this was only the beginning of an exhilarating clash of power, a twisted game that would make for some unforgettable neighborhood meetings. Let's make some waves, she said, determination sparking in her voice. As she took a step closer, I started to plan the next move, my mind already racing about how to push back, how to reclaim the sense of freedom this neighborhood used to have. I may have won the first round, but this was a battle, and the turf war with the HOA was far from over. Let's make some waves, Amy said, determination sparkling in her eyes. I leaned in closer, tension simmering just beneath the surface. We need a plan, something that will shake their foundations without giving them a chance to regroup. Squaring off against Marlene in the HOA is like poking a bear, she advised, glancing toward the retreating figures of Tim and Roy. We need to be smart about this. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of a glimmer of confidence creeping back over Marlene, who stood amidst a cluster of onlookers, her chin raised slightly higher. She was already spinning a narrative of victimhood. I could see it forming in her mind. Not if we act first, I said, thoughts racing. What if we gather the community, hold a town meeting, share our concerns, expose their overreach, preemptively strike? That could backfire, Amy countered, chewing on her lower lip. But if we frame it right... Our agenda needs to be clear, I interrupted, inspired by a rush of adrenaline. We highlight the issues Marlene and her crew are ignoring. And while we're at it, maybe throw in a few surprises for good measure. Surprises? Amy tilted her head, intrigued. Something to take them off their guard, I said, feeling the gears of strategy turning my mind. What if we included testimonial from other residents? Gather some footage, maybe even from today's incident. She nodded slowly, excitement building. A documentary of sorts, showing how the HOA abuses power, cutting out the fluff and showing the truth. Exactly, I said, my heart racing at the possibilities. And if we get Marlene to speak, all the better. Let her make that public apology we discussed, but do it at the meeting. That'll put her on an entirely different playing field. All right, she replied, eyes sparkling with determination. I'll help organize it. Let's set the date, and I'll reach out to some residents who have faced similar issues. Before I could share my own ideas, a loud argument erupted nearby, snapping us back to reality. I turned as Marlene confronted a neighbor about an unrelated dispute, voice raised, clearly irritated at the attention she'd just received. Everything's fine, she yelled at the man, dismissing him with a wave of her hand. That was just a misunderstanding. Don't believe the rumors. I exchanged glances with Amy, and the look on her face confirmed what I was thinking. If chaos was a game, then we would play it. Let's move. We can't miss this opportunity, I said, and together we wove through the gathering crowd toward Marlene. Excuse me, Marlene, I called out, approaching her with purpose. I've got a little proposal for you. She spun around, a mix of irritation and curiosity crossing her face. What do you want, Colton? Community meeting. You know, transparency and all that good stuff you care so much about. Why not share your thoughts with everyone? An incredulous look spread across her features. You think you can just hold a town meeting? Of course. Why should we be afraid of open discussion? We'll even record it. Make it public for all of Pinecrest to see, right? Don't want anyone thinking you're hiding something, do you? She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. This is your chance, Marlene. A chance to set that record straight. We can't let rumors fester when what we need is communication. The crowd, sensing the tension, leaned in closer, intrigued by the sudden turn of events. Marlene, think of all the good you could do for the community. I pressed, lowering my voice to a coaxing tone. You could reshape your image here and now. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty, calculations floating through her mind. But I knew the moment I pushed because the glitter of ambition replaced some of the irritation in her gaze. Fine, she finally said, voice tense but resolute. You've got yourself a meeting. But don't assume I'll just let you control the narrative. Wouldn't dream of it, I said, forcing a grin. Let's show everyone what true transparency means. As she retreated, the crowd broke into whispers, tension swirling like summer lightning before a storm. Amy turned to me with an exhilarating grin. Now we really need to prepare for this. Gather our testimonies. It's going to be bigger than just us. If Marlene wants to play Doty, I murmured, we'll have to step up our game. The next week flew by in a whirlwind of preparation. We set up interviews, collected footage from residents sharing their grievances, and built a comprehensive presentation that laid bare everything the HOA had concealed. When the meeting day arrived, the local community center brimmed with anticipation, and a palpable energy filled the air. Residents filtered in, sharing hushed conversations, while Amy and I took our seats to the front, ready to present our findings. Minutes before the meeting began, I caught Marlene talking with her allies, their expressions a mix of nerves and determination. I grinned inwardly. She'd stepped right into our trap. Finally, it was showtime. I opened the meeting, inviting everyone to share their stories. The atmosphere buzzed as voice after voice rose in solidarity against the HOA's rigid oversight. Then it was time for the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment we unveiled the footage of Marlene's disastrous attempt to tow my car. I glanced at Amy, who gave me a nod of confidence. As the video played across the screen, gas erupted in the room. I leaned closer, watching Marlene's fury replace itself with horror as the images played out. We've all seen Marlene's version of events. I announced. Floods of whispers erupted around the room, fueling the tension. Now, let's see the truth. As the video concluded, I felt the air shift, murmurs morph into a cacophony of disbelief and anger. Residents began to rally around us, their courage emboldened by the shared experiences. Marlene's expression twisted into one of desperation. "That's misleading. You've manipulated this," she stammered, but the crowd wasn't buying it. Manipulating? I echoed, letting the question hang like a noose. What we saw was a clear abuse of power. Just as her allies tried to salvage the situation, Amy stepped up beside me, her voice smooth yet cutting. "And that's the larger point, isn't it, Marlene? The narrative isn't going to hold if the community speaks up together." Her face blanched, fury and defeat warring within her. But just when the meeting seemed to be spiraling toward a tipping point, the unexpected happened. A tall man in the back rose, his voice booming as he addressed the crowd. "What if we took this further? Let's start a petition. Signatures for a recall. This is more than just about zoning laws." The crowd's energy exploded. Cheers erupted, voices chiming in agreement. "Recall! Recall!" They chanted, the rhythm building in intensity. Marlene's composure shattered in an instant. "You can't do this. I'm the chief. I deserve to lead." "Then lead with a community that trusts you." I shouted back, feeling the power shift entirely as a crowd rallied behind the idea. Her pleas faded into the clamor of dissent, voices rising against her authority. The energy of the room became a living entity, swelling like a tidal wave that she couldn't contain. As the realization dawned on her, I saw it, the moment where defeat turned into something irreversible. The chant of "recall" rippled through the crowd, drowning out her protests. And in that electrifying moment, I understood the beauty of unity, how a community together could challenge the very institutions meant to guide them. And just like that, Marlene's grip on power crumbled. Her face twisted in rage and helplessness, a stark reminder that authority holds no grounds against the will of the people. As the uproar surged, I couldn't help but think of how a simple misunderstanding had turned into a revolution, how through chaos, real change was born. Today, we take back what's ours. I shouted to the crowd, feeling invincible as their cheers erupted around me. Marlene stumbled back, and for a moment, I thought I saw defeat turn into something darker as she whipped around and stormed out, leaving behind a collapsing edifice of her power. But just as the roar reached its peak, a glint of mischief caught my eye across the room, a shadow dancing in the corner. The door swung open again, revealing a figure cloaked in black, someone I never expected to see. Chief Vickers. "Colton!" he shouted, breaking through the noise, eyes piercing and purposeful. The crowd fell silent, every head snapping to attention as the authority of the police chief commanded the room. The air crackled as tension shifted again, a new fear clawing at our chests. "Your little movement might just have made the wrong enemies," he declared, stepping forward, and I could almost taste the cold dread lurking around the edges of my victory. "What do you mean?" I managed to spit out, my heart racing. Vickers paused, a tension coiling around his words like a thunderstorm ready to unleash. "I think it's time you all learned that the fight is bigger than just you." And with that, the meeting spiraled into a tempest of confusion, dread, and the specter of deeper repercussions flooded our senses. Because in the midst of our triumph and exuberation, something more sinister loomed just beyond the horizon. A greater battle awaited, one that would turn our world upside down in ways we could never have imagined. As the reality settled on my shoulders, I realized this was just a beginning. In the chaos, this moment would not be an ending, but the first chapter in a saga that lay waiting to explode. Somehow, Just somehow, I had awakened something far beyond the HOA's influence. And deep down, I felt that echo of a single chilling thought. Now the game truly began.